I will have Kelsey unmute and introduce our speaker for today.
Thank you, Chad. I believe I'm unmuted. I am introducing Jason Parkin today. Jason grew up in Lamars, Iowa. He attended the University of Iowa, receiving a degree in communications. He attended Iowa State University, where he received a degree in meteorology. He worked in television for 20 years at WHO TV, KCCI TV, Weather Nation, and KCWI TV, forecasting and covering Iowa's ever-changing conditions. Jason joined Clear Mortgage last fall as Director of Business Development. He lives in Urbandale with his wife, Kelly, and sons, Nolan, Maddox, and Hudson, along with Radar, their dog. He enjoys cycling and being outside in general. Jason serves on the board of the Urbandale Chamber, the Polk County Health Services Board, and the Urbandale Parks Commission, and is a member of the Des Moines Morning Rotary Club. Welcome, Jason.
Oh, thank you, guys, and thanks for having me here. Let's see, I should be able to share the screen here, as we awkwardly all do in Zoom. So, well, you guys, which screen are you guys seeing right now? Are you seeing the presenter screen or the actual screen? Looks like the actual screen.
We have your picture with the Clear Mortgage.
Yeah, okay. Well, thanks for having me. I am a member of DMAM Rotary, and I know that earlier in the year, it wasn't the easiest to find speakers for us. So I thought, well, maybe other clubs are looking for content. So I threw my hat in the ring. As I had a job that was public facing and was interesting. And so thought I would talk about that. I have moved on. I've been in financial services now, which I never thought ever in my life I would end up in, but it's been wonderful. I've worked for Compass Financial Services and now for Clear Mortgage for 5 years combined. And I've learned so much, and it's funny where God sends you in life. And so, but you know, weather's always going to be a hobby. And in fact, I have my little, right here at my desk in my house, my little Davis weather station. It's 72 degrees. And actually 73 now, and that's as warm as it's gotten so far today. So we're off to a good start for the 5th day of April, that's for sure. Average high in Des Moines on this date is 58, so we're doing pretty well. My interest in weather, like a lot of people who grew up in Iowa, started when I was a kid. It's hard to not be interested in weather in Iowa when you have blizzards in the winter and tornadoes in the summer and flooding and things like the derecho we just endured. And this was a picture I drew for the local paper, the Lamar's Daily Sentinel, which is still going strong, when I was 5 years old. And I think the reason I drew it is because, so my birthday is July 1st. And I think the reason I drew it was because I saw a news story about the Jordan tornado, which a lot of you know a lot about, as it happened just down the road from you. And that's probably what motivated me. When I was a kid, I was scared to death of severe weather. My dad has a story about me crying with a football helmet on under his workbench during a storm. And then, so eventually the fear, like, and a lot of us go through this, turned to fascination. And when I got out of college the first time around at Iowa, it was 1992. The job market wasn't great. I went back home. I'd worked at a meat plant all through college, making big hunks of beef into little hunks of beef. And the local radio station had an opening. And the guy who worked there, my friend, knew that I'd done some speech and debate in high school and that I could talk and I had a pulse. And so I got the job. And those are the actual call letters, KLAM, as in Lamar's, Clem. And I worked there for a few years, and then I went back later and kind of filled in, but I loved it. I read the news, I read the weather, I did egg prices, I played music. It was such a great experience doing small town radio for this little AM station that barely covered Plymouth County. And so what I determined after a couple of years there was that radio doesn't pay very well, and that I had an interest in weather, in severe weather, and then I love broadcasting. And I thought, well, why don't I just combine them and go back and get another degree and just add to my college debt? What fun that would be. So I went to Iowa State and got a meteorology degree which by the way was a much harder degree. Meteorology at Iowa State, the first 2 years are all the same classes the engineers take. So it's calc, it's physics, it's differential equations, it's fluid dynamics in meteorology. So it was really a tough major. While I was doing that, I got a job at WHO Radio, and that's Jim Zabel, who probably none of you like, as you're the Ames Rotary Club, and Jeff Kahn on the left, who used to work in radio. But a great experience. WHO is, of course, a clear channel AM station, so I would get calls at night running the board from South Carolina and Louisiana, all around the country where that signal reached. Eventually, I worked there for a while, and they had a weekend morning weather position open up at Channel 13, and I got that job. And I got to work with great people. Lisa Bronis, I believe, is in Kentucky or Tennessee now. A lot of you remember Jerry Reno. He's still around. I think he lives in Windsor Heights. Jim Hibbs, still a good friend of mine. He's in realty. So being in mortgage, I talked to him quite a bit about what he's seeing and nowadays about our nutty real estate market. And I'm sure Ames is the same way. But what a neat experience to my first TV job. Of course, Ed Wilson, who's still a good friend. Jackie Jarris, who now works for the Weather Channel. She's had a great career and just tons of fun. Well, after a couple of years there, Curtis Gertz left KCCI and went to Salt Lake City. And so what they did is they hired myself. I don't know why I'm looking like that there, and Brian Carrick, and they wanted a 4-person weather team. And so I got to work with these two just really smart people, probably two of the smartest people I've ever met. Mike Lozano it lives down in Texas now, as an electrical engineering major. And then John McLaughlin, who's one of the smartest people about everything I've ever met in my life. And I learned almost everything I know about radar and interpreting it from him. And so I was there for 10 years. This was the first anchor team I worked with. Jason Elliott, Aaron Hurley at the time is now Aaron Smith. Steve Oswald, I think, lives over by Sully. And then I did weather, and I was there for 10 years doing weekend weather. And just met tons of great people. Curtis Gertz is still one of my best friends. Of course, Heidi Soliday, I see her once in a while on the bike trails. Todd Magel doesn't live too far from me. Emily Price is married to Channel 13's Dave Price. She works for a nonprofit called Count the Kicks. The Coonies, of course, great people. And just a great station to work at, and a wonderful experience. And I learned so much and got to cover some really amazing severe weather. The one that you guys might remember most was a Saturday, and I believe it was May 30th of 1998. You had big grapefruit-sized hailstones fall on Ames that day. It was a storm that came out of Boone and just basically went right down Highway 30. That was the year of the June 29th, 98 storm, which up until last year was the worst wind damage I'd ever seen. That storm went through Woodward and Granger, and then went into Johnston, while the derecho, of course, dwarfed that storm. Well, in 2008, of course, the economy died. And when the economy dies, people stop spending money on advertising, and TV stations make less money. And so they cut a bunch of us. But they did so as kindly as they could. They treated me very well, great severance and all that. And in fact, it wasn't long after that I went back and started filling in on a contract basis at Channel 8. And that was Stacy and John the day after I was let go with my picture in the lobby. So then I kind of bounced around. I worked at a company called Weather Nation in Minneapolis. Anybody who's lived up there would know the name Paul Douglas, a very famous weather guy up there, meteorologist. Brian Carrick and I went and worked up there for a while. I filled in Cedar Rapids. This is Channel 2 over there, KGAN. They have a really big weather wall over there. So that was kind of fun to do weather in a different couple of markets. And then for me, growing up in Lamar's and watching KCAU Channel 9 and KTIV Channel 4 up there, to be able to go up and fill in up at KCAU was just a thrill. I watched a guy growing up named Tom Peterson there, really famous meteorologist locally, and got to go to his station and do weather. So, things happen for a reason. And so bounced around for a while. And then the KCWI affiliate in Des Moines started a morning show from scratch. And so I went and did that. We had our third kid on the way, and I wanted to be closer to home and not be traveling so much. And so got to have this great experience with at first Heather and Karen Lee and Lou, and then Jackie came. And what was basically, and they're still doing it, of course, basically a radio show with cameras pointed at it and no scripts and just talking. And I got to do interviews, which I'd never done before. I did the weather, of course, but we had comedians on, we had musicians on. It was basically a local variety show. And it was a really good experience for me and kind of opened my eyes to some things. So one of the things that I got into this for was for severe weather. This was the first tornado I ever saw. It's not a great picture of it. Back, I watched from the deck of the house I grew up in back in 1994 when I was working at the radio station. And the crummy thing about TV weather is a lot of times you get into weather because you love weather, and then you get into TV and you never get to see weather again because you're always stuck in the studio covering it. Well, I worked for stations that wanted you out and wanting you informing people. And as the technology got better, eventually you could live stream what you were seeing out in the field. So this was um, the biggest tornado I ever saw. This was an F3 that happened up by Dunkerton, up in May of 2000. The Applington tornado that happened a few years back, the big F5, also damaged some homes in Dunkerton. But it's so great to actually be able to be out and to see this, and it really helps give you an understanding of how these storms work. So we were recording little clips of video and sending them back. I was with a meteorologist from the Mason City station and one from one of the stations in Cedar Rapids. And we were able to get people this information as this storm progressed, and just amazing to watch. We knew Northeast Iowa would be an area where we'd probably see some tornadoes that day, and it certainly panned out that way. So you see how wide this thing is getting. People ask if we get scared storm chasing, and I guess for myself, the way these rotating thunderstorms or these supercells are built, if you have an understanding of them, you know where to be and where not to be, and it's not that big a deal, really. What frightens me the most is lightning, because just like that situation there, you're probably the tallest thing within a mile of where you're standing. So I generally like to stay in the car when I'm filming this stuff, and my boys are old enough now that we can go out and do this. I don't know how thrilled they would be to do it, but it's certainly something that I'm going to continue to do because it's exciting. This was a few years later, actually a couple years later, up in South Dakota, up by Centerville. And it was interesting. It was a day when a lot of tornadoes up in northeast Nebraska, southeast South Dakota. And the memo didn't get to one of the airline pilots flying into Sioux Falls, and the folks in the aircraft actually got to look out their windows and see a tornado as they were landing at the airport. It's kind of unnerving. I think some people got in trouble for that. But again, what a great opportunity to get to work for a station that would let you go out. They wanted the pictures, they wanted the reports, and would let you get out of the studio and take your tie off and actually see the weather as it was happening. And in that case, we had a good relationship with the CBS affiliate up in Sioux Falls, so I was helping them out, chasing storms, and then of course was able to bring the video back to Channel 8 the next morning and show it and talk about what happened up there and the damage that occurred up in that part of South Dakota. So great experience. And then this was last May, from my house, looking over at Waukee, and I was home with the kids. Of course, kids were homeschooling as happened at the beginning of the pandemic. And I heard the sirens go off in Waukee, and I was being a dad that day. I wasn't paying much attention to the weather, to be honest, and looked out the window, and there's this tornado that started near Schottenkirk Chevy on Hickman and Waukee and moved straight north, went east of Dallas Center, and then kind of dissipated. But I guess that was the second time in my life I watched a tornado from the house I was living in, which I guess is kind of unnerving when I think of that. But most of the path was out in fields, so didn't do a lot of damage. Makes it interesting to give the tornado a rating when it doesn't hit anything. It's hard to tell how strong the winds were, but that's a nice problem to have. So my boys, who at the time were 10, 10, and 7, got to see their first tornado, which is something I didn't get to see till I was in my 20s. Really, again, a neat experience. And then I got into weather because I'm a weather nerd. I like the forecasting. I like making the graphics and telling the story and using the weather presentation as a way to educate. And so this was the stuff I liked. And again, lucky to live in a place where um, Channel 8 has all these cameras around central Iowa. And so our viewing area is huge. It goes from Algona all the way down to Ottumwa, the central third of the state. So without these, and you guys remember this was the day of the Woodward and Stratford tornadoes. This one, of course, clipped the northeastern part of Ames. It was the same storm that brought the tornado through Woodward. And then a separate storm farther north produced a tornado up by Stratford. Unfortunately, someone lost their life up there in that tornado. But this was the part of the job that I enjoyed, the forecasting and the nerdy stuff and the telling of the stories. And you know, I don't know if I would that I would do it again full time. Um, the the money's okay. It's not great. The hours are, of course, bad because you're either working till 11 at night or you're getting up at 1:30 or 2 in the morning to go to work, which just brutalized me. I was terrible at it. Some people can do it. I don't know how they do it, but it was really rough on me. And then, of course, the job security. I had, I don't know how many different weather jobs there, just bouncing around. So unless you're willing to move around the country, it's not the best career. And frankly, I married a physician, and we're not moving for television. She has a good job at the VA here, and but I'm grateful that I did it and had that experience. Certainly, I never got into it for whatever notoriety is involved in it, but it does help with what I do now. I mean, there are lots of companies that do mortgage, and when the guy calls who used to do weather on TV, it certainly doesn't hurt. It's certainly easier to get to know people. Um, and so it was a fun part of life. I'll give it that. And paid the bills for a while, and now I've moved on. I still have some great friends from that career. So eh, that's my presentation, but I will certainly hang out and answer any questions or talk about any comments you might have. I'm just hanging out. It's me and Radar the dog, and so I'll open it up to you guys.
Jason, I think that's that's awesome. I think if you would survey everyone in this club or all the clubs you're talking to in Iowa or even Tornado Alley, this would be one of those things, just like 9/11 and something else. If you've ever been involved in a tornado, you remember them, you remember the day, you have the stories that you could tell. What would be and maybe you don't know specifically, but do you know what would have been the worst as far as strength of storm or damage in Iowa history as far as tornadoes go?
I think as far as deaths go, there was one in the 1800s that hit Comanche, Comanche, over in eastern Iowa. And I think as far as deaths go, that would probably be the worst tornado. And of course, they had no warning system back then other than to look at the sky. In terms of strength, it would be hard to say. I mean, Parkersburg was up there. Dr. Fujita, who invented the F scale and now the EF scale, came, and some of you probably know this, came to Jordan after the Jordan tornado and did a storm survey there. And he said it was the strongest winds he had ever seen. Now, I don't know if he would have said that to the end of his career, but that was certainly a strong tornado. And again, as I mentioned, in Iowa, in a lot of the Midwestern states, sometimes you'll have these massive, very strong tornadoes that don't hit anything. or that hit things during the beginning or end of their life cycle when you can't get a good handle on what the wind speeds were. So, in fact, I just read an article about how these researchers think that a lot of times we underestimate wind speeds and tornadoes in the Midwest simply because we can't get a damage indicator from them. So, which again is a good problem to have.
Well, that's great. Other people, I'll try to monitor the chat here for you, Jason. Question from Allison Walter. Did you study derechos in meteorology school? Was there a course on derechos there?
Well, there were my junior and senior year, there were forecasting courses, and they were my favorite ones. In fact, my old professor, who I still talk to, Dr. Gallus, Gallus at Iowa State, was just on Channel 8 talking about the derecho, and Brad Small was on that report from the Weather Service as well. But yes, we did, and he would have been the guy who taught us about them. And of course, they're not. I wouldn't call them rare. I mean, they happen in the upper Midwest, especially in July and August. You tend to get those, and they kind of ride along the northern edge of the big heat ridges we get in July and August, where we're stuck in that sweltering heat for a number of days. And right along the edge, the northern edge of those, wherever that sets up, is where you tend to get those. Dr. Gallus in that report, and I started paying attention to it that morning. And again, I don't do it full time. I do it as a hobby anymore. But he said there was only one computer model that had forecast that to the strength that it was, and just incredible. And you guys know that. I mean, I'm in Urbandale. Most of the damage was north of us and up by you guys, and then over to Cedar Rapids, of course. So we didn't experience. I think the winds here got to 80, certainly above 70, but I didn't see what you guys saw. And but that I hope that's a once in a lifetime storm. Prior to that, the worst damage I saw was that June 29th storm that went through Granger and Johnston and Northeast Des Moines, and then continued on that night into Kentucky, went through Eastern Iowa. And so, I mean, tornadoes, for obvious reasons, get a lot of press, but the good thing, if there's a good thing about them, is they're usually not more than a mile wide, or usually a lot less, and they don't last as long as a windstorm like this does. So
Glenn Glenn has a question for you about climate change in Iowa. What do you see, or do you have some evidence, or what could you speak to there?
The biggest thing, if you talk to the folks at Iowa State, the biggest thing they see here are more heavy rain events and more flooding. For instance, the storm 2 summers ago that took Larry Kotler's life, the sports broadcaster, in July. That the rain that produced that flooding was ridiculous, intense, heavy, tropical rain. And I drove around there after it happened, and it's not like there's a creek over there in that part of Des Moines. It was just a pile of rain in a big hurry. And that type of stuff is certainly becoming more common. Um, and then overnight lows are getting a little warmer here, and that's for sure. And of course, this all becomes political, but those are two things that I would tell you are for sure happening in Iowa.
Any other questions for Jason, with his being so generous with his time today and putting together this presentation for us? Oh, I think maybe it was on one of your introductory slides, Jason, or something you talked about. I would say everyone probably tends to challenge the accuracy of the weather reporting.
Right.
So maybe you could speak to that from someone who's been in those shoes and dealing with challenges that a lot of us wouldn't understand. Give us some insight there.
I think, well, and all of us know this, that human nature is such that people don't remember when you're right. They remember when you're wrong. I think the worst part of TV weather for me was snow forecasting, because it's so challenging. And if you're 20 miles off on the path of a storm, it can make a huge difference in Iowa. And you guys know that. I mean, it seems like Highway 30 is always the rain, snow, and ice line. And Um, and then not only getting the forecast right if you do, but communicating it to people such that they understand kind of what you're getting at. I mean, I would go do the weather at Channel 8, come home and talk to my wife, and she would have a completely wrong idea of what I was trying to say in the forecast. And I'd say, no, I didn't say that. One of the other little pet peeves I have, and I love my radio friends, but we would make forecasts and email them over to the radio stations to read, and you'd be driving home and they'd be paraphrasing what you said and getting it all totally wrong. And so my name is attached to this forecast that was completely wrong. The other tough thing, and I mentioned how big the viewing area is here, is that you can have a tornado plowing into a tumwa. People in Des Moines don't care if Survivor's on. They want to see their show, or they want to see Blue Bloods or whatever. That was tough too, because then the phone lines light up and you get called names, and you're just trying to keep people safe and try and keep them from ending up dead. Um, so that part was kind of tough, but like a lot of things, anything public facing, after a while, you kind of develop a thicker skin and just understand that all you can do is do what you think is right and best, and um, try and walk the line between. I don't like seeing myself on TV. It certainly wasn't there to pump up my ego in any way. But you have a FCC license. It includes a duty to the public to inform them when danger is coming, and so those were the things that were the toughest for me.
You, you mentioned it wasn't extremely lucrative, but I hope they would see how they should compensate Iowa meteorologists more than like San Diego, California, where it's just boring. Same weather every day. It doesn't take a whole lot of skill to get that one right, right?
Yeah, well, and I'm not anywhere near good looking enough to do weather in LA or San Diego. They're all supermodels out there, and it is challenging here. Having said that, I think Denver would be tougher with the mountains right there, and I'm always amazed at what they have to do to forecast for different elevations and to communicate that. I don't, I wouldn't want that job. I think that would be very frustrating out there.
Gary Boteen asks, what was the most significant technological development in weather forecasting over the last 20 years?
Um, there are a few things that I think of. The improvement of radar technology, and now the dual polarization radar, where the radar waves go out in two planes. And so that does a couple of things. It lets us get a good idea of where it's hailing and where it's not, how big the hailstones are. And the other thing that it does in severe weather, especially in tornadoes, is it will really show you if debris is being picked up and wafted into the atmosphere. There's a product called coalition coefficient. And what it tells you is basically if there's a whole bunch of different size and shape stuff up in the air, which would be board, shingles, bricks, cows, whatever, and that lets you know, oh goodness, there is for sure a tornado on the ground, and it is for sure picking stuff up and wafting it up into the atmosphere. The other thing, and it sounds really simple, but a guy named Daryl Hersman at Iowa State developed this. You guys remember Yahoo Chat, AOL Chat? He developed a product for TV meteorologists and the Weather Service and emergency managers called NWS Chat, and it let all of us sit in these chat rooms together during severe weather and share information. And he would automatically populate it with warnings and severe weather statements and severe reports. And so when you were at the weather wall, and I'm sure they still do it, we would have a bunch of computer monitors right next to the wall. So when you're pointing and talking about the weather, you could look over here at this chat, and all this information is being updated in real time. And it was so uh, revolutionary for severe weather, because when I started and we were literally ripping stuff off of a printer to read, you'd go, 10, 15 minutes at a time and get no information about what was going on the ground. And nowadays there's the chat, the radar technology is better, there's cameras, there's all kinds of things that can help you. In the thing about the cameras too is I think when people can see it, they take it more seriously. You know, like there's a tornado and it's on the camera and it's coming toward your town. They're more likely to get in the basement and take shelter. And of course, that's what you're looking for.
Jeff Johnson asks, did you get involved in the Doppler war?
When I moved from 13 to 8, and by the way, that was a big deal. And Ed Wilson was just a huge supporter and said, you know, this is a better deal for you at Channel 8. This is better hours and better money. You need to go do that. But back then it was crummy, and I never liked any of that stuff. You know, it's not the way I like to play ball. Um, that competitive garbage. I mean, people watch who they like, and you just try and do a good job with your audience and give them good information. You know, I never got into all that stuff, but it doesn't seem to be like that anymore. I know Ed and Curtis are good friends, and so and Brad Edwards is a great guy at 5 and a great forecaster. So fortunately, I don't think it's like that anymore.
And it sounds like it's time to put you on the spot. You have degrees, I think, from 2 of our Regents universities, right? So the logical question would be, are you a Hawkeye or a Cyclone?
So my choices here are to pander to you guys or to be brutally honest. So I grew up, now when I grew up in the late 70s and 80s, Western Iowa was pretty Iowa State, or worse. Well, I shouldn't say worse because I like Iowa State, but a lot of Cornhusker fans where I grew up because of their success in football in the 80s and 90s. The guy I grew up next door to was named Greg Fetters, and he was a couple of years older than me and pretty much my big brother. I was the oldest kid in my family. He went to Iowa and played lineman, and he was kind of my hero. So I'm primarily a Hawkeye fan, but I have a degree from Iowa State as well. So what I have lots of good friends who are Iowa State fans. What I tell them is I want Iowa State to win 363 days a year. That's the best I can do. What's funny is I'm 50. My wife is just a couple years younger than me. When I went to Iowa, I was there from 88 to 92. You know, Iowa State, they were terrible at football. Let's just be honest. And so we didn't even care about Iowa State. Well, they started getting better, of course. My wife does not like Iowa State, and I'm like, no, they're great. I went to school there. It's a great college, great university. So even within our house, there's a little bit of division. But the campus at Iowa State is beautiful. I got a great education there. I still talk to my professors there, and I think very highly of Iowa State for sure. That's my story.
That's a pretty good one. Yeah. We'll take most of that. So thank you very much. Yeah. Appreciate you. You know, I know that sounds like you kind of had something to share, and there were a lot of, like you said, clubs looking for programs, and this was certainly a topic that, you know, all Iowans are interested in. So thank you for sharing. It was nice to look through some of those pictures you had of, you know, people and where are they now and that type of thing. Everyone kind of attaches to you and to others that are in that business. But thank you for taking time to share with us. We appreciate that.
Well, thanks for having me, guys. I appreciate it. I really do. And now it's 75 degrees, so we need to get outside today.
Yeah. So thanks a lot. I appreciate it.
You bet.
And for the rest of the club, Karen, I don't know if we're going to be on for a few more minutes here or not as we wind down here. If there were some people who want to hang out and talk for a couple minutes in fellowship, we'll certainly accommodate that. Again, next week, remember, a hybrid meeting. Please email Karen if you plan on attending at the Gateway. We have Rick Sanders from the ISU Research Park, who will also be joining us at the Gateway, but our intent is to also have a Zoom format for everyone who feels more comfortable with that format. And again, I think it's some type of soup salad sandwich lunch is on the menu. And so we'll bill those people who attend on their April invoice. So please let Karen know, and we're excited to see some of you in person as well, if that's where you want to be. And with that, let's go ahead and wrap things up with our 4-way test. Of the things we think, say, or do, is it the truth? Is it fair to all concerned? Will it build goodwill and better friendships? Will it be beneficial to all concerned? All right, thank you, everyone. Looks like a few people may be hanging out.
It's still like Park's
Maybe.
background. Park, yeah, they're dropping. Everyone's going outside.
Park, you're
don't
muted.
blame them. And Terry's muted.
Karen, I'll email you right now that I will attend next week in person.
Oh, great.
So I may be one of the
Yay.
first to do that. So we'll take care of that
Good deal.
small task, and I'll let you two escape to 75 degrees.
All right, thank you.
Hopefully you got me down, Karen.
I do have you down, and Jenny Legates
Okay.
has been there, and yep, Terry just went off. So I think we're going to call it good today.
Okay.
All right.
Take
Thank
care,
you.
everybody.
All right.
See ya.
Bye now.
Take care.